And you know what Jesus said? It's wedding time. Well, the bridegroom's here. The bridal party doesn't fast. When I'm gone, he said, they can take some time off. By the way, that's a cultural thing for the Hebrew. For the Hebrew, right? If you go and read the law, also the cultural law of the Hebrew, God had to demand they had celebrations. Because if he didn't, they wouldn't. So I'm just telling you that. I'm not saying go out and tear it up like the world does. I'm saying go out and have a good time like Jesus does. Right? Be happy, be joyful, be full of joy, and love people. Started with the church people. But he also says this. He said, but whoever has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and shuts up his heart from him, he does not love God. The love of God does not abide in him. I'm having a hard time reading today. My little children, let us not love the world. What's that? It's just... Yeah. In word only, but also in deed and in truth. So if we're going to love, John is actually going to tell us this. This is where we're going to launch off into how do I love practically. John tells us, look, if you're going to love, you have to love in a different way. You have to love, in fact, Jesus tells us this too, but you have to love in a way that's expressive, choice type love, starting with, listen, the brethren. Now when you love the brethren, you also have to love other people. You guys all know the story, right? I was going to tell the story. I'm just going to share this verse from the story. But you guys all know the story, right? The story of the Good Samaritan. Who here doesn't know the story of the Good Samaritan? Anyone? You don't know it? The story of the Good Samaritan. The story of the Good Samaritan is actually told in expression of this, right? Who is my neighbor? This was the question that was asked of Jesus. He said, right, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. So the scribe said, who's my neighbor? Trying to find a loophole. And so many of us do this with church, right? So many of us do these things in the church where we see something that God said and we're trying to find a way out of the thing that God said, or we're trying to do the thing that God said, but not in the way that God said. I don't know if you guys know people like that. You probably won't. Anyway. Right? And all of us probably at some point, right, have had this moment where we're like, well, I know what the Bible says, but... So, that's what was going on here, right? I know I gotta love my neighbor as myself, but I don't really like other people. So who's my neighbor? So Jesus tells them this story, and this is the story. The story goes like this. There's a Hebrew. I'm not going to go word for word here. We're going to kind of sum the story up just for the people who don't know it, but also to refamiliarize it. There's a Hebrew. Now he's talking to Hebrews. And Hebrews, by command, and they know this, you're supposed to love other Hebrews. They don't always do that, but know you're supposed to. And so Jesus tells, okay, well, there's a Hebrew. Man from Jerusalem. And here he goes. He's coming down the street, and he's attacked by thieves. And the thieves beat him, rob him, strip him naked, and leave him on the side of the road. And then a teacher of the law comes walking by, seeing the man beaten and naked, crosses over to the other side of the street and walks past him. But then to make it worse, he said, now someone from the tribe of Judah, in the line of Judah, living there, now comes down the street following, sees the man beaten and naked. He too crosses over the street to the other side, moves on. Then he says, now look, now a Samaritan. And the Hebrews at that time had a word for the Samaritan. They called them Samaritan dogs. Not even worthy of being considered people. We can address these things because that was the thing that happened in the culture at that time with the Hebrews. We know the Hebrews weren't supposed to be like that. In the same way that if you look at the history of the church has done a lot of bad things. When I say the church, I mean the people of the church. Now we know the people of the church aren't supposed to do all those bad things, but look, People who don't follow the word, people who don't really love God, they have a tendency, right? Or people who don't get the discipleship, people who don't learn how to live for God, they get into they have a tendency to act the way the rest of the world acts. And that's what happened with the Hebrews at the time. So here comes the Samaritan. The Samaritan was a hated enemy of the Hebrew in that area. Comes down the road and sees this man beaten and naked, bleeding. He cares for him. He washes and he bandages his wounds. He takes him to a hotel where he can rest and be cared for. And he pays for the man to stay there until he's healed. And leaves. This man leaves, expecting nothing. So then Jesus asked the scribe, who was the man's neighbor? The scribe said, well, the one who showed mercy. And his answer was the one who cared. I'm actually going to flip this around for just a second because that's the truth. The truth is those are neighbors. The neighbor is the person in need. Who's my neighbor? The person who needs you. The person who's in need out there in the street. That's your neighbor. The person in the church, by the way, who's in need. That's your neighbor. And I know people in the church don't like to share their need. I don't know what that is. We'll call it false pride. It's definitely not real pride. The church is here so that we can provide for one another. So we don't share our need. Instead, right, you're going through something, you need to talk to someone, you need something from someone, you need help from someone, you need prayer from someone, whatever it is, right? What do we say? No, I'm blessed. Well, look, God uses other people so that He actually can be blessed. Why don't we share the need? The person who shares the need is also a neighbor. It's the person who cares. So as the man said, he said, look, so Jesus, so which of these three do you think was the neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? And he said, look, he who showed mercy. Then Jesus said to him, look, go and do likewise. Go and do what? Go out and care. He didn't say, be a neighbor by being indifferent or staying away or staying in your home. Be a neighbor by caring. You have to pay attention. You have to look for people. You have to understand that there are people in need out there. And go. The going part oftentimes seems to be the most difficult. Just go out. Be involved. And by the way, when you go out and you be involved and you be a neighbor to someone, can I tell you something honestly? People don't appreciate it. That shouldn't stop you from doing it. I talked about the love of God last week, and this really is the thing, the love of God. The love of God that's in us. That's what we want to express it, but that love is for love's sake. It's not so that you get something in return's sake. So as we go out and we love, who do we love? We love the person who's in need. We love the person who's hurt. We love the person who's down and out. We go to the person, right, who calls out to the man on the street. Sir, can you help me? It's cold and I have nowhere to sleep. Just somewhere you can tell me. Oh, think twice. That's 6 weeks in a row, by the way, with the song reference. You're welcome. Trying to keep my snap streak alive. It's been remade, but the original was Phil Collins now. Okay. So how do we love? First, we care. How do I practically love my neighbors? First and foremost, I have to care about other people. A lot of times that means getting over ourselves. We'll get to that at a different time, at a different day. Philippians 2:3 says this, let nothing be done in selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than themselves. Here's another way that you can practically care for people. Think they're more important than you. You can almost hear the thinking right now, but they're not. Oh, but they are. Now you could start with this. If you have a hard time thinking other people are more important than you, how about you at least consider other people as important as you? In this same passage, actually, Paul goes on to say in his letter to the Philippians, he says, when you make decisions, don't consider yourself only, but also consider others. Right? At least put them on the same level. Don't make decisions to think, well, it's my life, it's my decision. What difference does it make to you? Anyone ever said that to you? Why does it matter to you that I'm doing this? Because I made the decision, first rule, right? I made a decision to care and to express the love of God to you. And what you're doing is harmful. And because I care, it matters. Why? Because you're important. There's no categories here. When I care, I go out and I see someone in need. You ever see someone in need and they ask you for something, you don't want to give it to them? It's really as simple as this, right? Give to those who ask of you. And some of us that means I have to give to people who hold up a sign that I never talk to. That's not what that means. What it means is when someone's in need and they're willing to express their need to you. I tell people this all the time. Oftentimes, some of you may be here who gave this response before, but they're going to do the wrong thing with it. They give them something, they're going to use it wrong. They're going to do the wrong thing with it. Yeah, that's not the caveat in the command. I hear what you're saying, and you're probably right. Lost people do lost stuff. That's not what he said. He said, give to those that ask you. Give, expecting nothing in return. So how do I do that? Well, don't do anything through selfish ambition or conceit. Don't think you're better than them, and don't think you're going to get something from them. Instead, do it with lowliness of mind, thinking that they're worthy. Sir, can you buy me a hamburger? Absolutely. So you do it. Absolutely. I was on my way into Taco Bell. They don't really serve hamburgers, but right, we'll go someplace else. Or is it okay that your Taco Bell, that your hamburger is ground up in a sauce? Sure. Hamburger like that, I guess. That's the mild sauce is basically ketchup. Someone asks. It's as simple as that. And it's not difficult to do, but the way you do it is, look, in the way my wife would tell me, get over yourself. Get over yourself. My laptop is having issues right now. It's beyond your own control. So this is one of the ways we can do, right? We care. Part of caring, by the way, I'm going to give you a practical way to care. Look for a need and go help. I asked to give you a practical way of what one brother here at the church has done, right? Wayne he bought an electric scooter so he can get some more exercise. But not by the wish he did. By rotating the throttle.
His forearms.
He's building up his right forearm. Beneficial. I've seen those Popeye shows, right? And so Wayne buys an electric scooter. He's riding an electric scooter around the neighborhood, and he comes to me and said, "You know what? There's a lot of homeless people. I see as I go through the neighborhood, and I kind of get outside, and he's like, they're at the parks. They're like, looks like I just wish there was a way I could help." And he was talking to them. He was trying to. So Wayne, we have all this stuff. We have these goodie bag kits, and we're getting more, so he can take more out. We said, "Look, we got these ones already put together, and then I can give you a box. You can put some more together, right?" What is that? That's loving my neighbor. That's getting out, seeing that there's a need somewhere. Look, I can help with this need. And it seems like maybe like some people look at it, what's a small way? Are they still homeless? Yeah, I'm sure if Wayne had an inventory of houses, he might be handing those out too, but he doesn't. Right? Instead, he has an inventory of basic need stuff, personal hygiene, some first aid stuff, right? As Ray Ray likes to say, he gives get along bags. It doesn't get you far, but it gets you along. That's the way we love our neighbor. See a need, fill a need. Consider them worthy. Be okay. Apparently, we're having issues with the OneDrive. Keeps on telling me I don't have permission to be in my own. I'm the administrator. It's like, I think the error pops up and it's like, ask permission from the administrator. Well, I'm logged in as an administrator. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do about that. Anyway, moving right ahead, what else can we do? The Bible says, let brotherly love continue. And do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so, you may unwittingly be entertaining angels. This is an amazing verse, and I love this. You know what it tells me? Hebrews tells me exactly this. Love the church people, but don't forget to be helpful to people outside the church. By doing that, there may be a blessing in that. There might be something that's going to be immeasurable and great for your spiritual walk, for your physical life. There may be something great in entertaining strangers. Because in doing that, it might not just be a stranger, it might be a message from God. Or in this case, literally a messenger from God. So many times, right, the church is great at well, you go to my church. If you go to my church, I can care about you because you go to my church, right? And we're not so great at, in fact, when we're going to go through this, and it probably it'll be a few months, but I've already planned out through sometime this next year where we're going to go through, not Revelation as a book, we're going to go through just the 7 churches and what we can learn and why it matters. One of the churches is accused of exactly this. You've done great, Jesus says, in providing for the needs of the church. And for that I commend you. But, he said, I have this against you. You forgot what you're supposed to be doing. You forgot about your first love. You forgot, look, your command was to go out. You're not going out. You're not caring about other people. Right? In the church we call it, right, us four, no more, close the door. Right? And there are some churches that are like that. This church is not us four. It's like us 4,000 and no more, close the door. And that's okay. Right? But if you're not on the membership roll, you don't matter. It shouldn't be that way. We should care, by the way, for other believers. Let brotherly love continue. That brotherly love is familiar love. The familiar love you should have for other people. But don't forget to entertain strangers. Look, just because you don't know them doesn't mean you shouldn't be good to them. Amen. Here's another thing we can do.